We can talk now to the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, Pat Cullen. Great to have you on the show this morning. I'm sure this is going to be the kind of #1 priority for so many of our viewers this morning. Nurses from your union are shortly going to be walking out. What is the impact of that strike going to be?
Well, clearly there will be an impact, of course, there will be. But it's an impact that can be stopped by this government if they get round the table again and start to talk to me about the hundreds of thousands of nurses that participated in this ballot. But leaving that aside, I want to just correct one thing that was said by Mark Harper this morning around the Royal College of Nursing not putting in place national exemptions to make sure that our patients are continued to be treated safely during this period of strike. That's not true. We have put national exemptions in place, and our nurses, as I've said time and time again, will never leave their patients unsafe or create more risk that's already in the system at this point in time.
Can we just clear this up?
Yes.
Right? Because I'm confused,
Yes.
I'll be
Yes.
honest. I'm totally confused
I'm
about what
not
exemptions are in place and what aren't.
Yes.
Previous strikes, there have been exemptions for emergency care, right?
Yes.
A&E, cancer, maternity and so on. My understanding was that some hospitals will get exemptions, Great Ormond Street, for example, who have raised concerns about staffing levels, but not all. So what is the truth? What's going on?
There are national exemptions in place for a range of services, for emergency departments, for intensive care units, for neonatal units, paediatric intensive care units, those really acute urgent services. We have put national exemptions in place. We've worked tirelessly with NHS England. In fact, it was the Royal College of Nursing contacted NHS England to ask for a process to be put in place so that we could make sure that this strike was safe for our patients.
Because that's not what I thought, right? So what's gone on there? Has it changed or...?
Look, we issued our notices 14 days ago, as I said. We contacted NHS England to work with them and alongside them to put a process in place. We have that process in place and those national exemptions have been granted. Right up until last night, we were working on those. Okay. And right throughout the period of strike, we will continue to have an incident room within the Royal College of Nursing, headed up by a very senior chief nurse, that will ensure that any exemptions that are requested during that time are considered carefully and on the clinical basis that they deserve.
Are you confident then that lives won't be put at risk by this strike?
Well, you'll have heard me say time and time again, why are nurses going on strike? They're going on strike because patients' lives are being put at risk every single day. And why? Because we have tens of thousands of vacant nursing posts. So I want to say something else to some of the general managers that have toured the studios speaking over today and other days. And what I would say to them is, think carefully about what they are saying. And none of those people, I believe, have walked in the shoes of our nursing staff. And I would say to them as well, it's interesting that they've come today to talk about the risk that's posed as a result of our nurses taking strike action for the very reason that I've said, because of the crisis within the health service. And I would ask them, for those other 364 days of the year, speak up for their nursing staff. Tell what the risk is that they are carrying every single day. And I would also ask for those general managers, how many of them have ever walked in the shoes of our nursing staff? So instead of coming out today against those nursing staff, come alongside them and don't try to silence them.
You're talking about general managers of hospitals?
Yes, I am.
So
yes,
you think that actually they don't really understand what some of their hard-working nurses are doing?
Well,
Is there a bit of a split, you think?
I think there has to be when you hear some of the comments this morning from the Chief Executive of NHS Employers, for example, talking about the risk that's posed on the day of a strike. And I would ask him to step back and think, why have nurses taken this action after 106 years? Because of the risk that they are carrying every single day on behalf of their patients. So whilst the day of a strike is important to the likes of the NHS Employers Chief Executive, those other 364 days when the burden of that risk is carried by our nursing staff should also be important. And walk in the shoes of those nurses and see what it's like.
Look, I can see your passion, right, about the service that you represent. Just putting to that one side, though, because the question was about patient safety on the strike days. Do you accept that nurses going on strike does put patients at risk?
I accept that on days of strike, that services do not have the same level of nursing staff that they would have on other days. But again, Sophie, I go back to those other 364 days.
I understand that point on that, but I'm just asking specifically
but it's
about the
inseparable.
strike days.
It really is inseparable. Why have our nursing staff been pushed to the brink to take this action and lose another day's pay on a day of a bank holiday when actually they would get a few extra pounds and they're willing to take that on behalf of their patients? And why? Because they cannot continue on with the level of risk that they're carrying. It's those people that sit at the bedside of the patient and know that when they leave, they've left care undone simply because there's not enough hours in the day. And these are selfless people. They're standing up for their patients. What I'd ask is for NHS employers and this government to get behind them. And I think if we listen to the voice of nursing, we'll do the best thing for the NHS and we'll certainly do the best thing for those nurses.
Now, the government's offered a 5% pay deal. Unison have accepted it. GMB have accepted it. Why should the RCM be different?
Well, I believe that nursing is different because nursing is the only profession that stays alongside their patient 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And they believe that the short-term money that was put into their pockets as a result of this offer, non-consolidated it's referred to, it gives them money now, but it's taken back out at the end of the year. So what they were saying is it might put a few pounds in my pocket as an individual, but it does nothing to address the recruitment and retention crisis that we've got in nursing. So again, it's back to that selflessness bit about them not being greedy as an individual, but they're wanting to address the long-term problems within the health service.
What I can't work out is that you recommended this deal to your members, right? So you must have thought it was a decent deal.
Well, our ruling council carefully considered it, along with myself. And when you look at the total package, there were elements of that package were actually worth putting to our members and asking our members to consider.
So you can't have thought it was that bad then, if you recommended it, right?
Well, look, the money was never going to actually be what our nurses would have accepted. It's half.
So why did you recommend
it's half below inflation because, and I will explain. There were issues there that we actually felt were worth looking at around safe nurse staffing policy positions, which we feel would leave us in a better position to have safe nurse staffing legislation put in place. And again, that's about nurses striking for the health service and for their patients, not them as individuals. And the other element, which has got a little bit controversial with the other unions, but there's a rationale for this, and that is that we need to look at the pay structure that awards nursing staff. And why do we need to do that? Because the current pay structure does not work for nursing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the retention and recruitment problems we've got. 62% of our nursing workforce sits in the lowest band within Agenda for Change, and they don't enjoy some of the other terms and conditions within Agenda for Change that some of the other professions do. Now, this is not about pitting ourselves against other professional groups. It's about asking for nurses to be treated the same and alongside those other professional groups.
I've got to ask, you endorsed a deal that ended up being rejected by your members. Are you now feeling that you have to slightly overcompensate to kind of shore up your own position in the union?
Absolutely not. I am in an absolute privileged position to be able to represent hundreds of thousands of nursing staff. I actually believe in them. It's a privilege to represent them. They have said loud and clear, this deal is not good enough. It will not address the issues that we're trying to address within the health service. And for me, it's not historic. It is not a historic pay deal in relation to the historic action that they have taken. I've heard it described as fair and reasonable. There are fair things within the deal, but it doesn't go far enough. And that's why we need to get round the table again and to start to address these issues.
Now, on Tuesday, of course, the health unions are meeting with ministers to see if a majority of NHS workers accept the 5% deal. And because the biggest unions have backed it, Unison, GMB, it's pretty likely it's going to go through. So you nurses will get the 5% pay rise if that happens. What will you do then? Will you take the money and still go on strike?
We'll still encourage the Secretary of State to get round the table with the Royal College of Nursing. If you look at the strike action that has taken place to date, it has been taken by nurses and the Royal College of Nursing, and it has been taken by those nurses. Those hundreds of thousands of nurses voted to take strike action after 106 years. So we can't ignore the voice of those people. And if he continues to do that, and this government does, we will be reballoting our members come the mid-May, close mid-June, and that means that we could face strike action right up until Christmas period. But again, I would urge the Secretary of State, Steve Barclay, and this government, and particularly the Prime Minister, don't push nurses to that position, because there's no win for patients out of this, and it's wrong to do this for nursing staff.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Pat Cullen there of the RCN explaining her position. Thank you very much for coming to the studio this morning.